Namaste and welcome to a presentation on company directors. We will study the nature and duties, type and appointment, provisions of the Act, board of directors and their meeting, disclosures as required under the Act, and remuneration and appointment of managing director, whole-time director and manager. That will be on company directors as such. This is an overview, and over to the first part of it, nature and duties. Board of Directors is a body which is in charge of the operations and management of the company. It will have directors, including directors called by the names managing director and whole-time director. As a board, they are a collective body and all policy decisions of the company are reviewed and operated by the directors as a body. And here the managing director or whole-time director, so to say, they will be recruited either by the articles of the company or by a separate agreement, or they may be appointed by a resolution passed by either the board or by the general meeting. Just like the managing director, the entire board has at its disposal substantial powers to ensure the company operates at its best level of efficiency. The role the directors play is quite important, and it is dynamic also. They act as agents of the company, they act as trustees, and they act as officers. And in these three roles and the way they play it, their role is quite pivotal. As agents, they represent the company and they receive notices and deal with outsiders on behalf of the principal, that is the company. And they will not have any personal interest in any transactions that they carry out, and they will disclose if there is any personal gains in any transaction. And that is the valuable role of an agent of a director. Second, as a trustee, the relationship is that of fiduciary position. It is a role of good faith and all for the benefit of the company, to ensure that whatever action a director does, be it making of calls or issue of shares or refusing to transfer shares, all in the overall interests of the company. And if the director fails in delivering results based on his trusteeship function, he shall be liable to make good the monies which the company has incurred because of the misapplication done by the director. As officers, the role is quite crucial. It is a professional role of directing and controlling the affairs of the company. Therefore, the board is rightfully called as the primary organ of the company. When they play these three roles, the whole intention is to maximize value for the entire family of stakeholders, be it the shareholders, employees, general public, consumers, all interests considered together, and it is the maximum benefit to the entire community involved in the success of the company. As a pivotal role, directors manage a company for the benefit of all shareholders and those who look up to the company for the benefit of efficient management and fair dealing. Considering the role of directors as agents, trustees and officers, we find they have got certain duties to be working in accordance with the articles, promote the objects of the company, and work for the best interests of employees, shareholders and the community. Apply due diligence, take reasonable care and skill, and don't have conflict of interests. Company's contracts have to be done for the company. There should be no admixture of personal and company interests going together. And there should be absolutely no undue gains or undue advantage for personal benefit. And the office that a director occupies is an office of the company. The director cannot assign his office to someone else because it is not his personal property. It is not assignable. And when he does this, he is driving the business safely, following all rules and regulations, and he is sure to reach the goals of the company as a dutiful director. And any contravention of the provisions of the section 166, which speaks about these functions, they are punishable with fine incidentally. Now we will proceed to type and appointment and study the 6 heads. Section 49 is a very interesting section for some specific reasons. It says who can be a director, that is only individuals could be directors of the company. Then it goes on to talk about the minimum number of directors a company should have. It says a public company should have a minimum of 3 directors. A private company should have a minimum of 2 directors. And a one-person company need to have 1 director. This is so far as the minimum number of directors is concerned. When it talks of maximum, it says a company can have at the maximum 15 directors. What if a company wants to have more directors? It facilitates. Section 149 says you can have more than 15 directors by passing a special resolution to that effect. There is a way for your will. Section 149 also talks of 2 special type of directors, woman director as well as independent directors. It says every listed public company needs to have at least 1 woman director, and it needs to have at least 1/3 of its total number of directors as independent directors. When you say 1/3, 1/3 means if there is any fraction, it shall be rounded off as 1. 1.25 becomes 2. This is regarding 1 woman director and 1/3 of the total as independent director if the company is a listed public company. And it also specified something about at least 1 director should stay in India for a period of not less than 182 days during the previous financial year. It is for the sake of ensuring certain unavoidable compliances, and availability of a director for a specific period of time makes a lot of sense for compliance and ownership. This is the importance of section 149 on directors, minimum maximum woman director, independent director, and if you want to have more than the maximum 15, what is the procedure to be followed? Section 152 is a very interesting section which talks mainly of four things. It talks of the first directors of the company. Second, it talks of appointment of every director. Number three, it talks of directors liable to retire by rotation. Number four, who will retire and when? It also talks of that. 5, it says if a director is supposed to retire by rotation in a meeting and there is something happens in the meeting and he is deemed reappointed, what is that situation? These are the 5 situations which we need to be very clear about. Let us take first things first. The first directors of the company, normally they are mentioned in the articles of association. And these first directors operate from the date of incorporation of the company till the next annual general meeting. They operate till such time without any further formalities. If the articles do not indicate the first directors, section 152 says all subscribers to the memorandum are considered as the first directors of the company. And it goes without saying that first directors operate till the conclusion of the first AGM that follows after incorporation. Second part, it talks of who appoints directors. In case of first directors, it was mentioned in the articles or they were subscribers. But every other director of the company is appointed by the company in general meeting. Means the meeting of shareholders always appoints every other director. And when it appoints a director, it is required that the director has got a director identification number DIN under 154 or 153. The appointed director has to give a declaration that he is qualified to be the director, means he doesn't attract any disqualifications mentioned in the Act. Number 3, he gives a consent that he is available to serve as a director. DIN, declaration and consent, these 3, they have to be filed with the registrar within 30 days of appointment. And this is applicable for every director appointed by the company at any point in time. Subsequently, the section talks about directors liable to retire by rotation. It says, take the total directors of the company. Out of the total directors, you need to remove women director. You need to remove the independent directors. You also need to remove the nominee directors. Directors, and there is one director called small shareholder director. These are the 4 types of directors which do not fall within the definition of directors to retire by rotation, because they have got a specific time period specified for their tenure. You take the total directors. Out of total directors, if you exclude these, the balance directors, out of the balance directors, section 152 says not less than two-thirds of directors, excluding these four varieties, have to retire by rotation. And how do they retire? One-third of such directors are liable to retire every year at the annual general meeting. Means, of the total directors, we exclude specific directors. Of the balance, two-thirds is grouped as directors to retire by rotation, and out of these directors who are supposed to retire by rotation, every year one-third retires and is replaced. It is retired and replaced. Okay, every annual meeting, one-third of the retirable directors have to retire. If the one-third comes to fractions, it says nearest to one-third. 3.3 becomes 3 only. Who has to retire out of the retiring people? One who is longest in office has to retire. If two directors are there who joined on the same day and one is supposed to retire, who has to retire? What is the guideline? It says there can be an agreement between the directors, or it can be done by lot. Same day joined, one of them has to retire, by lot you decide who has to retire. What happens after a person retires? It creates a vacancy. That vacancy has to be filled up in the same meeting. Now, can a person who retires, can he be once again appointed for the vacancy? Yes, it is possible, but it is not automatic. The company has to give a notice that Mr. So-and-so is retiring by rotation, is eligible for reappointment, and the company is pleased to consider him for reappointment. In that case, if the resolution is passed, he can be reappointed as a director. Section 152 talks of a specific situation. It says a person is retiring and the company has not expressly filled the vacancy. It has remained silent. He has retired at the general meeting. And subclause number 7 is quite interesting. It says, if the vacancy of retiring director is not filled up and the meeting not expressly resolved not to fill the vacancy, the meeting stands adjourned till the same day in the next week. In the adjourned meeting next week, once again, if it is not filled up and meeting doesn't decide anything, then the beneficiary will be the retiring director. He is considered to have been reappointed to that position automatically. It is called deemed reappointment. Means the company has to specifically state that we have not reappointed him or anyone else. Now, deemed reappointment will not be automatic. It has to fulfill some conditions. What are those conditions? Number 1, there should not be any reappointment resolution which was lost in his favor in the meeting. Means the company wanted to reappoint him, but the resolution was lost. There is no deemed reappointment. The retiring director himself gave it in writing that he is not willing to continue. Then he loses the chance. Third, he has attracted a disqualification and is disqualified, therefore no automatic reappointment. And as per the terms of appointment, there should have been a resolution specifically asking him to be reappointed in terms of the Act, but that resolution was not passed. Fifth, if any director to be appointed, section 162 says Each one resolution. You cannot have appointment of multiple directors in one single resolution. There must be one resolution for the appointment of one director individually. If that requirement is not fulfilled, there is no deemed reappointment. To put it once again, 152 talks of first directors, subscribers to memorandum, balance directors, total directors, total directors excluding women, independent, nominee director and small shareholder director. Of them, two-thirds to retire by rotation. Of the retirement by rotation, one-third to retire every year at the annual general meeting. The retiring directors will be by arrangement or by lot, and one who is retiring, if the vacancy is not filled up, there is a chance of deemed reappointment automatically. Section 161 talks of four types of directors: additional director, alternate director, nominee director, and director in a casual vacancy. That could be appointed by the board of directors. Board of directors appoint these four types of directors. Let us understand each one of them. Additional director is appointed when the board feels that they need a fresh director to be added for the sake of operations, but general meeting is way ahead, they cannot wait till such time. In that case, what they could do is they could make a temporary arrangement and appoint an additional director by way of a resolution in a board meeting. One thing we have to remember, when board appoints, it has to ensure it doesn't reverse the decision of an AGM. For example, if in the concluded AGM, if a director has lost an election for appointment as a director, he cannot be once again rehabilitated as an additional director. Additional director is to help the board to have enough number of directors to facilitate their operations. It's a privilege to them. It is not to rehabilitate somebody. And this additional director will hold office till the next annual general meeting, and then the decision, subsequent recruitment will be done by the members. It's a temporary appointment. Number two is if one of the directors is going out of India for some time and the period involved is a minimum of 3 months and above, the board can appoint an alternate director in place of the person who is away from India for a period not less than 3 months. And this alternate director will attend meetings and be available to company so long as the original director is outside India. The moment the original director comes to India, the position of alternate director is closed. He cannot continue. And whenever an alternate director is being appointed by the board and the original director is an independent director, as we will see, independent director is a professional director who has got expertise in one specific field, say law, accounts or finance. When he is going out of India and his position is getting vacant, when you bring a replacement for him as an alternate, even the alternate director candidate should be equally qualified. You cannot have an alternate director for a finance independent director in the form of a legal alternate. No, They should have equivalent and compatible qualifications so that the position of independent director keeps serving the company. And the alternate director, as we saw, will vacate the position once the original director returns to India. Supposing during the period the position of the original director who is outside India is going for reappointment under retiring directors. Who is reappointed? Is it the original director or the alternate director? We have to be very clear. Alternate director is a temporary post. It depends on the primary post of the original director. The reappointment is always of the original director, not of the alternate director. Coming to nominee directors, most of the time companies will borrow money from the banks or financial institutions. The lenders want to have a close watch on the operations of the company by putting a member on the board of directors. Such directors who represent financial institutions or bankers and find a place on the board are known as nominee directors. They are nominees of lenders. They will be on the board as per the term indicated in the sanction of finance, and they are not liable to retirement by rotation. Then there is a post of a director who has expired, who has died, or who has resigned. There is a vacancy. And he resigned, say, 6 months before his term ended. In that case, for those 6 months, the board of directors can appoint a person in that vacancy. Any vacancy that arises because of resignation, disqualification, or death is called a casual vacancy. That casual vacancy could be filled up by the board, and the duration of that appointment will be the residual term of the original term, and the term will come to an end once the original term also comes to a close. This is about the 4 types of directors appointed by the board. Section 149, through its subsection 6, highlights the conditions a person meets to be eligible to be really independent, to be appointed as an independent director. It says he is a person of integrity and has got relevant experience. Perfect. He is not a promoter. He has no pecuniary relationship other than his salary. None of his relatives hold any interest in the company, nor they owe any money to the company. Himself or his relatives, they don't hold any managerial position. He is not in any way connected with the auditors and company secretaries or cost auditors of the company or any other consulting firm. And if the company is giving any donations to non-profit organizations, he is not a chief executive of any such organizations. Subclause 6 of 149 lists out what makes an independent director in terms of his qualifications. And this is what is required when he joins as an independent director. And once he joins, there might be changes in these situations. He is supposed to bring to the notice of the company as and when there is a change in his status with a declaration. There is one schedule 4 which talks of what is the code for independent directors, listing out do's and don'ts. If you take an independent director, he is not eligible for stock options. And his term is 5 consecutive years every term. He is eligible for reappointment. He can go for 2 terms. And he is not a nominee director, he is not a director retirable by rotation, but he is expected to act professionally and responsibly. He shall be liable for anything occurred because of absence of diligence and care on his part. Independent director is a statute directed move to have a third eye on the operations of the company, which should fulfill all these qualifications. Rule number 4 on the number of independent directors lays down 3 parameters to be considered while insisting that they need to have at least 2 directors who are independent directors. The conditions are: it's a public company, paid up share capital of rupees 10 crore or more. It's a public company, turnover of 100 crore or more. A public company which has got an aggregate debt, that is loans, debentures and deposits exceeding 50 crores. Either 50 crores of debt, 100 crores of turnover or 10 crores of paid up capital. If any of these 3 conditions are met, that public company needs to have minimum of 2 directors known as independent directors. And it is up to the company to have more number of independent directors depending upon its requirement for internal committees like audit committee and remuneration committee and the like. If there is a vacancy in the post of independent director, the board of directors can fill up the same within 3 months of the vacancy, and the company, if it is not fulfilling any of these 3 conditions for 3 consecutive years, it need not have to worry about recruitment of a independent director. All these paid up capital and turnover as well as the debt is based on the latest audited financial statements. We can note that Rule 5, which deals with the qualifications of independent director, summarizes the essentials in 2 points. Number 1, it says an independent director shall possess appropriate skills, experience and knowledge in 1 or more fields of finance, law, management, sales, administration, research, technical operations or other disciplines. Means he should be an expert in 1 or more of these fields. Second, it talks of a financial limit in terms of none of the relatives of an independent director are indebted to the company or its holding company or subsidiary or associate company or their promoters or directors, any one of these, or has given a guarantee in connection with any indebtedness of a third person in respect of the company, holding, subsidiary, promoters, directors, etc. for an amount of rupees 50 lakhs anytime during the 2 immediately preceding financial years. Means during the last 2 years, their exposure in terms of debt or guarantee to this group, promoters or the company holding or subsidiary companies, should not have exceeded rupees 50 lakhs. 2 things: qualification and expertise, and exposure within limits of 50 lakhs by any of the relatives of the independent director. This is simply a guideline. Rule number 3 elaborates on woman director. It classifies companies into two. One, every listed company, it is mandatory to have a woman director. Any other public company, means other than listed company, if the capital is 100 crores and above, or its turnover is 300 crores and above, it also should have a woman director, at least one. If there is a vacancy in the position of woman director, as we noted in respect of independent directors, it has to be filled by the board within 3 months of the vacancy or the board meeting date, whichever is later. Means intermittent vacancy has to be filled on priority, and for listing company it is mandatory. For public company other than listed company, it is depending on meeting the share capital norm of 100 crores or turnover norm of 300 crores. Section 169 talks about small shareholder director. This is applicable to a listed company. A listed company can go for a small shareholder under two circumstances. One, suo motu, on its own, or when it receives a notice from not less than 1000 shareholders. Now, when it receives a notice or when it decides, it can go for a small shareholders director. If he receives a notice from 1000 shareholders, the notice should be received at least 14 days before the meeting. It should specify the name and address of the proposed person who is proposed by the small shareholders as their director, and the proposed gentleman has to provide his director identification number. He has to give an undertaking that he is not disqualified in any other way, and he has to file his consent with the company. Subject to this, the company can proceed to appoint him as small shareholders director, which position is similar to an independent direction. As an independent director, he is not liable to retire by rotation, but we have to note his tenure is only 3 years and he is not eligible for reappointment. And we have to note that he has to fulfill section 164, not to attract disqualifications. He should not attract the grounds which attract vacation of office under 167. And he should fulfill the criteria of independence as listed under subsection 6 of 149. All things done, a small shareholders director can hold that position in not more than 2 companies at a time. But there is one more rider. The other company where he is a small shareholders director should not be competing with the business of the current company, else it will be a conflict of interest. Therefore, he can be of 2 companies, but the 2 companies should not be having conflict of interest in business and they should not be belonging to the same group. And after his retirement as a small shareholders director, there is one more rider under the Act. For 3 years after he ceases to be a director, he shall not be associated with the company in any other capacity. See, this provision of having no association for 3 years after the person has completed his duration of directorship, to keep the position totally away from any misuse and keep it as a respectable independent director's post to protect small shareholders' interest. It is time now to have a look at the provisions pertaining to directorships, disqualification, vacation, resignation, and removal. Section 165 talks about the ceiling on number of directorships in a company. It says a person can be a director in no more than 20 companies at the same time. 20 directorships one could hold. This includes alternate directorships also. And out of these 20, number of public companies is restricted to 10. And public companies include private companies which are subsidiaries of a public company. Of course, this doesn't include dormant company. Means a private company which is a subsidiary of another public company, or which is a holding company of another public company, will be included in this ceiling of 10. And the section further goes on to say it is up to the shareholders in a company who by a special resolution can specify a lesser number of companies as the ceiling, both for maximum as well as for public companies. And a director of a company has to fulfill the conditions of the Act and also the conditions as set by the shareholders, else he will attract contravention and penalty as proposed. Section 176 is a provision which protects against the validity of appointment of a directors as regards its implication for the decisions which he has taken. The section reads, no act done by a person as a director shall be deemed to be invalid, notwithstanding that it was subsequently noticed that the appointment was invalid by reason of any defect or disqualification or by virtue of any provision contained in the Act. It talks of two situations. One, acts before the deviation was noticed and acts after the deviation was noticed. Any act done before the deviation or defect was noticed, it is valid. But any act which is done by a director after noting that there is invalidity in the qualification or appointment, this will not be valid. Therefore, the benefit of doubt and protection is available only till the defect is noted and identified. Any action done after that is not pardoned. Section 164 lists three situations where it says a person needs to have qualification to be appointed as a director. If he fails to pass through this test, he attracts disqualification. If we analyze these three sets of items, 164 subsection 1 talks of qualifications as pertaining to the person proper. It all pertains to him, or these are the acts of omission or commission on his part. 164.2 talks of acts of omission or commission of a company where he is a director. These are lapses of the company where he works as a director. Number 3, it talks of privileges of a private company. Let us take one by one. What are the personal disqualifications which prevents a person from being appointed as a director? Number 1, he is declared as of unsound mind by a competent court. He is an undischarged insolvent, or he has applied for adjudication as an insolvent and his application is pending. And fourth one, he is convicted by a court for imprisonment of not less than 6 months and 5 years have not expired since the expiry of the sentence. He was sentenced for 6 months. He completes sentence in 6 months. After that, a period of 5 years should be complete, but till such time there is a disqualification. But in respect of conviction, there is one more interesting requirement. It says this concept of 5 years and 6 months is all fine, but look into the total sentence. If the sentence passed is 7 years or more, he shall not be eligible to be appointed under any circumstance in any company. Means the conviction by the court should be less than 7 years, and after completing those 7 years he should have completed 5 years, then only he could be taken. But if the sentence itself is for 7 years and more, he is permanently excluded. And there is a disqualifying order passed by a court or tribunal against him and which is in force. Next point, point number 6 is he has not paid any calls on his shares and 6 months have already lapsed for payment of call. He is convicted under section 188 in respect of related party transactions during the last 5 years. He has not procured the director identification number, and 165, he has violated the condition of ceiling on maximum directorships. If he does any of these things, attracts any of these, it is his personal lapses or personal disabilities. Second set, where he is a director presently, if the company where he is a director, if there is a lapse on the part of the company, there also he will suffer disqualification. A director not eligible to be reappointed or appointed in another company for 5 years from the date of failure of company fails and the impact will be felt for 5 years. Where does it fail? It has not filed the financial statements or annual returns for a period of 3 financial years continuously. Okay, not filed financial statements. It has failed to repay deposits or interest thereon, or redeem debentures or pay interest thereon, or pay declared dividend, and failure continues for 1 year. It has delayed it for 1 year and not yet paid. These two conditions, filing the statements and annual returns for 3 financial years, or failing to make payment of dues of deposit and interest, debenture and interest, and dividend, and the failure continues. In these cases also, though it is a mistake of the company where he is a director, it affects his disqualifications 1 and 2. Come to third condition. Third thing says a private company can be more ruthless. In addition to this point number 1 and point number 2, it can provide for additional disqualifications. That adds fire to the fury. This is so far as disqualifications for appointment of a director. In the sense, if any of these conditions are fulfilled, the person cannot be considered for appointment as a director. Section 167 talks about vacation of office of director. If we can take section 164 disqualifications as the cause, section 167 is the effect. Section 164 lists out all disqualifications a director suffers, and consequence of that is indicated in 167. Here it lists out not only section 164, it has got a list of other things which action of a director will result in vacation of office. No need to repeat. Section 164 disqualifications result in the vacation of office of a director. In addition to that, there are certain actions of a director which has the consequence of vacation of office. What are they? If the director absents from all meetings during 12 months, with or without permission of the chair, he will vacate. If he enters into any contracts without following the requirements under section 184, interested matters, he vacates. He fails to disclose his interest in certain contracts under 184. In the previous case, he enters into contract. Here he fails to disclose. Here also it causes vacation of contract, vacation of office. In the meanwhile, if there is a court order or order from the tribunal disqualifying him on any ground, that disqualification results in vacation. And any convicted offense of not less than 6 months imprisonment will result in vacation of office. And in addition, he is removed pursuant to any provisions of the Act. Removal means vacation. And if he became a director by holding a employment in the company, if that employment is lost, his director's post also is lost. For example, if he is head of HR and by virtue of being head of HR in the company, he is opted as a director on the board, the day he loses the position of head of HR department, which is an employment post, which brought him to directorship, if the employment is lost, directorship is also lost. 167 deals with what is the consequence of attracting disqualification under 164, and also what are other additional acts of a director which makes him vacate the office. After vacating the office, it is incumbent on the director. He stops functioning as a director because he has ceased to be one. If he functions, it will attract imprisonment or fine. The section talks of a specific situation where all the directors vacate their offices for one or the other disqualification. What should the company do? It says, for the immediate requirement, either the promoter can appoint required directors, or the central government may be requested to appoint required directors to hold office till directors are regularly appointed in the general meeting. And fourth point under 167 is, with all these consequences, a private company can have further privilege of adding additional conditions for vacation of office. Just to summarize, 167 is a consequence section which says all disqualification will result in vacation of office. In addition, certain acts of absenting, failing to disclose or entering into contract with interested matters, and losing an employment which was the reason for being a director, all these things result in vacation of office. And one should not function as a director after vacation of office. If he functions, he will attract penalty and imprisonment. And when all directors vacate for one reason or the other, for the sake of operationalizing the business, the promoter or the central government can appoint required directors till directors are regularly appointed in a general meeting, and a private company can add conditions over and above these for vacation of office. Section 168 touches upon what happens when a director resigns. A director, when he submits his resignation by giving a notice in writing to the company, the board will take note of the same, and it will be informed to the members by way of board's report in the ensuing general meeting. And the resignation might carry an effective date for vacating office, else it will be effective from the date it is received by the company. And the director is also free to forward a copy of that to the registrar of companies. Anyhow, the company, after receiving the resignation, will forward a copy of it and file it officially within 30 days of date. Once a person resigns, his liability for future transactions is not there. However, his liability for actions taken during his period will be persisting and continuing. And as we have seen in case of vacation of office by all directors, where all directors of a company resign for any reason, once again the promoter or the central government can make the interim appointment of a requisite number of directors to operate till the general meeting makes a regular appointment of directors. A removal of directors, as indicated in section 169, makes a subtle discrimination between directors appointed under the principle of proportional representation and others. It says this section of removal of directors is not applicable where directors are appointed under proportional representation system. In the other alternative, in the normal course, if the directors have been appointed, then it says the procedure is different for an independent director and the procedure in respect of any other director. In case of independent director, the resolution should be a special resolution. In case of other director, it should be an ordinary resolution. So far so good. But whether it is special resolution or ordinary resolution, for removal of a director, there is a process. A notice has to be given by the members who want to remove a director. That notice has to be given ahead of the meeting. And that notice will be sent to all the members of the company. The moment a notice of removal is received by the company, it should follow the course of natural justice in respect of director proposed to be removed. He will be shared a copy of the removal notice and asked for his representation. He can give a representation in writing saying what is his version of things, and he can give it to the company and ask it to be sent to all members along with the notice or subsequent to the notice. This is to give him a hearing. If the company says it was not able to send it to the members, then such representation at the request of the director being removed could be read out at the meeting. In the process, if the company finds something wrong with the representation received from the removable director, it can approach the company law tribunal stating the representation has got an attempt to get needless publicity for a prejudicial matter. In such an event, if the tribunal is convinced, it can order the company not to send the representation to members nor present it as read out at the meeting. But the process is like this. Once the person is removed by virtue of passing the ordinary or special resolution after the notice and representation, there is a vacancy. That vacancy can be filled by a fresh appointment. But to appoint a person other than the person who is removed, there should have been a notice received by the company for appointing a new person. If that notice is received and the resolution is moved, a new person can be taken into the vacancy, and the person who is appointed in that vacancy will hold the position for the balance term of the predecessor. If the residual term of the old director was, say, 6 months, the new person who is appointed now will last for 6 months in office. If the company doesn't recruit a replacement for the vacancy, the ball goes to the court of the board. The board of directors can make an appointment treating the vacancy as a casual vacancy, and the person who is appointed in the casual vacancy will continue till the next AGM, where the regular appointment will be made to the position. Whenever a director is removed and he has got another contract of agreement with the company for employment, for breach of that contract, if anything has to be paid to him, the removal of directors will not come into picture. That contract and his rights and enforceable claims under that agreement is independent of the removal. For example, if a person joins as a managing director and he has got a contract to be a managing director, and he loses the position as a director by way of removal, the other contract cannot be continued, then in terms of the agreement of appointment, he has to be paid the compensation. This is 169, which talks of removal of directors and the process to be followed and the result therefrom. Now we will have a look at the board of directors and its various provisions on quorum, committees, powers and restrictions. Provisions on meetings of board contained in section 173. It talks of first meeting of the board to be held within 30 days of incorporation. Thereafter, the requirement is every year you should hold 4 meetings, and between 2 meetings the distance should not be more than 120 days. This is a simple requirement as per the section. And how to participate in the meeting? You can participate in person by video conferencing or video visual means, only to ensure that proper recording and storing of the proceedings with the date and time is possible. And it talks of a situation where you have started a meeting with a quorum through physical presence. Can other directors join on video conferencing or audio visual means? Of course they can join. Means you can start a meeting with physical presence quorum. Later it can be joined by other directors on other media. And as regards notice, a board meeting can be convened with a notice of a minimum of 7 days in writing, handed over by post or hand delivery or electronic means. Can it meet with a notice less than 7 days? Of course it can, provided in the meeting there shall be at least one independent director present. What happens if one director is not present? The decisions taken at such meeting, where notice was not fully given, it was short, the proceedings or decisions to be circulated to all directors, and it should be ratified by at least one independent director. To put it the other way, any reduction in the number of days of notice has to be consented to by an independent director, either through his presence or by approving the decisions sent by circulation to him. Section 174 talks of the minimum quorum for a meeting. It says it should be 1/3 of the total strength or 2 directors, whichever is high. And how could the quorum be present? It could be present by participation physically, or by video conferencing, or by other audio visual means. And quorum is allowed under all the media. If the quorum is not met because the number of directors has been reduced below the quorum level, what the company should do? For example, if the quorum is say 5 and available people is only 4, then the meeting cannot be held. In such a case, the section says the board can meet to increase the number of directors and bring it to the level of quorum, or it can meet to summon a general meeting for the sake of recruitment of additional directors to address the issue of quorum. It cannot conduct any other business in such a meeting. Means it is a quorum development meeting to be held by the board. Third is in respect of impact of interested directors exceeding 2/3, because we are talking of 1/3 as of the total strength as the quorum. But if the interested directors itself is in excess of 2/3, we will not be meeting the quorum. The section says, if quorum is adversely affected by the interested directors, the not interested directors will form a quorum provided their number is not less than 2. Because to form a meeting you need minimum 2 people. Therefore, interested directors affecting the quorum is negated by stating that if the number of disinterested directors is not less than 2, that itself will be the quorum. Fourth situation the section talks of is, you have convened a meeting, but the meeting cannot be held because there was no quorum. It says, if there is no quorum, the meeting of the board gets automatically adjourned to the same day next week and at the same time and place. These are 4 basic things which section 174 talks about the quorum. This is a method of passing resolutions by the board called resolution by circulation. The process followed is, the resolution is circulated in draft together with all necessary papers to all directors or members of a directors committee by post, courier or electronic means, and it will be approved by a majority of the directors who are entitled to vote. Without meeting, by approving it in draft, the resolution is passed and it is taken on record in the subsequent meeting of the board and it will be included in the minutes of such meeting. That way, the process of resolution by circulation is documented. In the meanwhile, if not less than 1/3 of the directors say, no, whatever resolution we have passed by circulation is not okay, we want it to be discussed and passed in a meeting. If the members who are asking are not less than 1/3 of the strength of the board, the board is obliged to convene a meeting and get the resolution processed through a regular meeting of the board. Rule number 4 pertaining to sitting fees makes out mainly 3 points. 1. The amount of sitting fee paid should not exceed 1 lakh rupees per meeting, and such sum may be decided by the board of directors, and there should be no discrimination in terms of amount of sitting fee between independent directors, women directors and other directors. Section 177 talks of appointment of an audit committee by a very listed company. The audit committee shall have 3 minimum directors and majority of directors in audit committee shall be independent directors. And the terms of references to the audit committee will be furnished by the board. Normally, the scope covers terms of appointment of auditors, effectiveness of audit process, scrutiny of intercorporate loans, valuation of undertaking or assets of the company, internal control and risk management, and usage of funds raised through public offers, roughly. The audit committee can discuss in the course of its work all the related issues with both statutory auditors, management and the internal auditors. It has got the authority to investigate all related matters. And auditors of the company and the key managerial person also have got a right to be heard by the audit committee. It is mutual and reciprocatory. Wherever the board doesn't accept the recommendation of audit committee, it shall indicate that in its director's report at the end of the year with reasons. And the section also mandates that the listed company shall have a vigil mechanism for adequate safeguards against victimization of persons, and such mechanism shall be disclosed on the website of the company. Section 178 talks of formation of two committees, one known as Nomination and Remuneration Committee, second one is Stakeholders Relationship Committee. The Nomination and Remuneration Committee focuses on identifying future directors and grooming them with proper evaluation of performance and proper policy of remuneration and recognition. A Nomination and Remuneration Committee will consist of 3 or more non-executive directors, and one half of the composition shall be independent directors. And the chairperson of the company can be a member of that committee, but he shall not be the chairperson of that committee. He will be a member. And what the committee will do is, it looks for grooming of existing staff at the senior management level to become directors by laying down criteria and setting processes and fixing up policy which are based on remuneration which is reasonable and sufficient, effort reward relationship in every remuneration package, relationship of remuneration to performance, balance between fixed pay and incentive pay, and such policy as is evolved by the Committee of Nomination and Remuneration will be finalized, and it will be disclosed in the report of the board, and it is put on the website of the company. It is building the future for the company and the future management team, and grooming is the principle behind this committee, which is formed in a listed public company. Similarly, a committee of stakeholders and relationship known as Stakeholder Relationship Committee is formed, where the company has got more than 1000 shareholders, debenture holders and deposit holders. It will be once again having non-executive directors as its members, and the chairman may be as decided by the board. Its main purpose is to resolve the grievances of security holders and to ensure that the interests of the investors and shareholders is looked into at the right earnest. It's quite interesting to note the powers of the board as enshrined in section 179, and to start with, it highlights board of directors have all such powers as the company is authorized to exercise and do. Means whatever the company can do, board of directors can do. But then it puts a rider. It says subject to number one, the act, number two, the memorandum or articles, and number three, the board shall not exercise those powers which are the jurisdiction of general meeting. To put it simply, board can do anything provided under the act, provided under the memorandum and articles, and provided it is not within the area of general meeting. It cannot encroach upon general meeting's rights. So much for board has all such powers. Means general meeting has got powers which can prevail over the powers of the board. But there is a protection to the board. It says, no regulation made by company in general meeting shall invalidate any prior act of the board. Means anything that the general meeting does, it cannot be retrospective, it can be prospective. It cannot reopen what the board has done in the past within its authority. Okay, that is point number two. Point number three, it says board has got all powers, but there is a process. The following powers can be exercised by the board only through resolutions passed at meetings. What are those powers pertaining to? Making of calls, buyback of shares, issue of securities, borrowing of money, investing of funds, granting of loans, approving the board report, diversify the business, approve merger or reconstruction, take over substantial stake in another company or any other matter. The whole thing here is all these major decisions are required to be passed at meetings only. They cannot be by circulation. Out of these powers, it says powers D to F. D to F powers are to borrow money, to invest funds of the company and grant loans. These three powers can be delegated by the board to a committee of directors, managing director, manager or any other principal officer. This is the fourth aspect of it. These three powers could be delegated by the board to a committee of directors for implementation. And these 4 points very specifically put across what is the scope of powers of the board, which is empowered to do whatever the company can do, subject to the control of matters which are within the area of general meeting. Section 80 lists 4 specific powers of the board which can be exercised only with the consent of the company by a special resolution. These 4 are: when the board wants to sell or lease or otherwise dispose of an undertaking of the company. It defines undertaking means where an investment of more than 20% of the net worth of the company is put into it. It is more than 20% of the net worth. Then it becomes an undertaking. This undertaking, which carries 20% of the net worth of the company, when it has to be disposed of, substantially the whole, it says of this, when it wants to dispose of almost one fifth of it, it is called substantially the whole of the undertaking. Whenever the board wants to sell this, where the investment is more than 20% of the net worth of the company and it is being sold to the extent of 1/5 or more, a special resolution approval from the company is required. And when the company gives approval by a special resolution, it will also indicate how the amount from the sale of this particular undertaking could be used on what purposes. There is a rider here. When the board is authorized to do this, and there is a specification as to where the money could be used and how it could be used, it shall not be used for any reduction of capital. This is the first restriction on the powers of the board. In the second case, where the board wants to invest any compensation received from merger or amalgamation in securities other than trust securities. Trust securities are considered to be the most liquid and most safe investment. Whenever the board wants to invest in securities other than trust securities, the company wants to play safe, it says it should be supported by a specific resolution by the company. Third, where the company has to borrow in excess of its paid up capital, free reserves and securities premium, which is almost similar to net worth. When a company borrows more than its net worth, there should be a supporting resolution from the shareholders. Without supporting resolution, the company cannot borrow. And in this connection, there is a rider under clause 5. If the board with this resolution ends up borrowing more than the amount indicated in the resolution, because the resolution, the point number 2 says, any resolution under C1 shall specify the total amount up to which the monies may be borrowed. Even after giving the resolution, if a lender gives the company more than what was specified in the resolution, it can be regularized, but not otherwise. To put it the other way, whenever a board of directors is supported with a resolution which indicated the amount to be borrowed, if the board ends up borrowing more than what was specified, the borrowing is invalid and it cannot be enforced against the company. And the fourth restriction is in respect of where the board wants to give remission in the payment of any debt due from the director, only the shareholders in their meeting can give an approval, not otherwise. To revisit, number 1, to dispose of the undertaking which is worth more than the 20% of net worth. Second, to invest in securities other than trust securities. To borrow money in excess of net worth. Number 4, to remit any debt due from the directors. Company has to give consent by way of a special resolution. Section 182 refers to contribution made to a political party. A political party is one which is registered under section 29A of the Representation of the People's Act. To contribute, a company should have been in existence for not less than 3 financial years. It can contribute directly or indirectly to any political party. When it pays indirectly, it can pay to a person who is carrying on any activity which is likely to affect public support for a political party. Second, it can pay towards an advertisement in any publication, and such publication is working for the advantage of the political party. And the third condition which is put in the section is the amount paid has to be disclosed in the profit and loss account during the financial year, and the payment shall be by check, drawn on any bank or through electronic clearing system. These are the minimum requirements on the political contribution. It has to be noted that any payment made towards political contribution has to be supported by a resolution passed in the meeting of the directors. Now let us proceed with the topic on company directors. Section 184, talking about disclosure by a director of his interest. It says when the disclosure has to be made, it has to be made at the first meeting where he participates as a director, and any change in his disclosures, he has to disclose it in the very next meeting of the board after such change. This is so far as when is concerned. In respect of what? In respect of a body corporate where he holds more than 2% of shareholding or is a promoter or manager of that body corporate, or he is a partner in a firm. This is in respect of whom? And at what stage? He should disclose the nature of this at the meeting where the contract is being discussed. And what else he needs to do? He should not participate in such meeting once he becomes interested. And if a contract is made without proper disclosure, the contract is voidable at the option of the company. And the director who fails to disclose contravenes the provisions of subsection 1 or subsection 2, and he is punishable with imprisonment and fine or both. Section 185, relating to loans to directors, talks of 4 major things. First, it says no advance of any loan to any director or any company which is its holding company, or any partner or relative, or any firm where such director or relative is a partner. It is a perfect no in these cases. In the second case, it says a company may advance any loan to any person in whom any of the directors of the company is interested. Now, any person includes a private company, a body corporate where he holds not less than 25%, any body corporate which acts in accordance with his instructions or directions. In these cases, it says a conditional yes. Conditional yes is we can lend to them provided there is a special resolution passed and the loans are used by the borrowing company for its principal business activities. First clause says no, second clause says conditional yes. Subject to the resolution which specifies the details, loans can be given. And it says 185 doesn't cover any loan to a managing or whole-time director, loan given as part of conditions of service, any scheme approved by members of a special resolution, any loan made by a holding company to its subsidiary, or any loan made by any bank or financial institution, it is subsidiary. These are all exceptions. And it says if there is a contravention of clause 1 and clause 2, the company shall be punishable, the officer in default will be punishable with imprisonment, and the director concerned shall be punishable with imprisonment up to 6 months. Section 188 talks of related party transactions. It is a 4-stage process. First stage says any transactions with the related parties, unless there is a consent of the board, no sale or purchase of goods, selling or buying of properties, leasing of property, rendering of any service, appointment of agent, or related parties appointment for office or place of profit, or underwriting subscription of securities. In all these cases, there must be consent of the board before any contract is made. As regards the office or place of profit, it says if the director receives something from the company in addition to his remuneration as a director, then it is an office of profit. This is at the board's level. Second stage of screening is where sale, leasing, D is availing rendering any services, and E appointment of agent for purchase, where the value involved is more than 10% of turnover in ACDE, or in case of selling or buying, if the property value is more than 10% of net worth of the company, or in respect of F, office of place of profit, if the remuneration per month is more than rupees 2.5 lakhs per month, or in case of underwriting subscription, if the value is more than 1% of net worth. In these four cases, in addition to consent of the board, there should be a company resolution for approval in advance. Prior approval of the company by resolution is required. If these two conditions are not met, the company has got the right to treat the contract as voidable and come out of the contract. Second, it can proceed against the director and any other employee who is involved. Number three, if it's a listed company, there is an imprisonment with fine. In case of other companies, it is punishable with fine. Therefore, these two requirements are to be strictly adhered to in respect of related party contracts. That brings us to the last part of the presentation, MD, whole-time director and manager, on their appointment, remuneration and relation to profit. Section 196 summarizes the specific terms of appointment of managing director. There are mainly 5 points. 1, you can have a managing director or a manager. You can't have both simultaneously. Number 2, their term cannot exceed 5 years. They are eligible for reappointment, but you cannot make reappointment 1 year before the expiry of the term. And there is an age limit. It should not be below 21 and it should not be above 70 years. Where the age is above 70 years, there should be passing of a special resolution, or if an ordinary resolution is passed, then central government has to approve it in addition to the application by the board. He should not be an undischarged insolvent. He has not suspended payment to his creditors, and at any time he has not been convicted or sentenced for more than 6 months. The terms and conditions of such appointment will be approved by the board. Then it will be passed by the general meeting. And if there is a requirement in terms of the Schedule 5, Part 1, then central government approval is required. If the executive is working and the appointment is not subsequently approved by the company in general meeting, acts done by him in the interim will not be considered invalid. Schedule 5 lists the act where he should not have been sentenced to imprisonment for any offense thereunder, and other conditions have already been considered by us. Section 197 mentions about the overall maximum managerial remuneration limit. It is computed as per section 198 net profits, and it shall not exceed 11% in all. Any variance has to be subject to a special resolution passed by the company. In the normal course, if there is one managing director, he shall get 5%. If there are more than one, it shall not exceed 10%. Directors with managing director, director's share will be only 1%. When there is no managing director or whole-time director, directors will get 3%. Wherever the company has defaulted to bank or creditors, before distributing the managerial remuneration, they have to obtain approval from such banks. And these percentages are exclusive of any fee payable to the managerial personnel. In a year where there is no profits and the profits are inadequate, payment has to be made as per table appearing in Schedule 5. And this remuneration is payable to a director or whole-time director in addition to the professional fee payable to him, provided he has got assignment of a professional nature and he has got the professional qualification. And this is in addition to the sitting fee which is paid to directors without discrimination. If any director draws or receives more than the ceiling mentioned here, he shall keep the money in trust and it shall be refunded to the company unless approved by the company by a special resolution. And that's it. That concludes the presentation on company directors in its 6 components, which we have gone through in detail. And the same is presented in a tabular form for a ready reference. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.